And oh, very good. Okay, we're on. Yes. So I'm introducing Leila Dueck, our guest speaker today. And Leila has been, she's the former communications director for the provincial ombudsman and is now retired and is picking up again, although you never totally dropped it, your love of poetry, and is even writing some of her own work. So we'll have her talk today about why I love poetry.
And I'll just add to that, if you went to an exhibition at the gallery years ago called For Emily, it was dedicated to Emily Dickinson, and was timed with the meeting of the International Emily Dickinson Society. I did an exhibition where you would go in and you'd hear the poetry of Emily Dickinson being recited. It was Leila's voice.
Oh, yeah. The voice of Emily Dickinson.
The voice of Emily
Dickinson. Yeah. And I should also say that she's a longtime member of the Regina Apostolic Church here in Regina. So a local poet, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to get back in there and unlock the word hoard again.
Very good.
I might say
the word treasure in
the word
English.
The word treasure.
Hoard, yeah.
Sort of open up that dusty box and see what we can find in there. So yes, good morning. And it is wonderful to be part of this group and to be with you today. Am I speaking loudly enough? Everyone can hear me all right? Louder? I know sometimes I don't know how quiet I am, so I'm just checking.
Good.
So yes, and I have to admit that poetry is one of those topics that seems to live on the fringes, not always ranking as the top mode of entertainment. But I think poetry often gets to the heart of things. And so I hope we can do a little bit of that today. Brenda has told you a little bit about me. And so, yes, when I was an English major back in the day, I had thoughts about creative writing and doing readings or reciting poetry out loud. And I just got to the point where I didn't know what I would write about. I just wasn't sure. And there was a job waiting for me, and off I went and spent my whole career helping other people say what they wanted to say. And so it's kind of come back around now. And I've got to look in here and figure out what I want to say. So, yes, this talk is titled Why I Love Poetry. And I am planning to read you several poems. You've got handouts there. And we will talk about them a little, though probably not as in-depth as some of the conversations that you've had with Brenda. And first of all, though, I just want to ask all of you, since you're here and we're talking about poetry, what do you like about poetry? Or if maybe there's a certain type of poetry that you like, what do you like about it?
Sarah.
Sorry, I'm in school, so
That's
it's
good.
very normal for me to raise my hand.
Good.
I would have to say that I really like how it's structured in a way that makes it more accessible. I know a lot of people, especially my classmates, mentioning me being in school, they're kind of nervous to start writing, and poetry is kind of not the entryway, but it's a little more of a nuanced but also accessible way to come into it, rather than jumping into what are all the rules of free verse, what do I do here? It's kind of like, here's your structure, build on it how you want to, and break the rules later on.
Good point.
Thank you. Yeah, but that's true. People sometimes think that free verse is easier, and I've heard lots of poets say it's not. And actually that the structure gives you something to start with. So yeah, that's really true.
I love the imagery and the emotion.
Imagery and emotion. Nice.
I always think of Dead Poets Society and that line, what is the purpose of poetry? To woo women.
And you did write me a poem.
It works.
I wasn't sure I interpreted it right, but I guess I did.
The way some poetry, the cadence gets into your head. And then the way that you sit with it, and the more you sit with it, and the more you just kind of mull it over, the more you get out of it. And it's just this wonderful kind of blossoming and opening up of meaning. So you have like layers of depth, which is really fun.
Yeah. So you start with the sound and then you work your way through into all the layers of meaning as you get into it. Neat. Yeah, I really relate to that.
Enjoying some ancient Chinese and African poetry right now because it makes you delve into the culture. What does that word mean? What is it like?
Yes.
So really, really enjoying that. The structure is completely different.
Yes. And do you find you're just chasing rabbit trails after a while because it's so interesting?
Yeah.
That would be me. It is, and you know, I was recently, I didn't get to attend this talk, but I see that there was a talk recently about haiku, which is a Japanese form of poetry, and we've always thought that it was based on this, just the structure and the number of beats per line, but there's actually a lot more to it. And according to the person who was giving the talk, that the line structure is kind of one of the lesser things that they look for in it. So, yeah. And other thoughts?
I felt I've read a lot of the Psalms, which is poetry, which you
Yes.
see even our church that we Sunday psalm, although not the whole psalm often. And then to learn about how poetry was in ancient Hebrew is not like ours. We often I found when I first started reading the Psalms, it was off-putting. Why does it repeat all the time? It says this and it says the same thing. But no, they just cut out this line. But that is ancient poetry. That's sort of like we have rhyme. Everybody says, oh, it's a poem. They mean it rhymes. That's sort of probably most people think of poems as rhyming. They don't necessarily, but ancient Hebrew, it did rhyme. Rhyming is not something that was just this repetition. It was that was sort of an early understanding of poetry as maybe not what I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I think too that in societies that were more verbal, whether it was rhyming or repetition or other things, they helped you remember, I think, just remember the words.
That's what I was thinking, that I like poetry because it's easy to memorize and they stick in my head. Usually I can still remember poems years ago.
Yes. Yes, I find that's really true as well. So yeah, that's a great list. And I think we look for different things in different types of poetry, and also at different times of our lives. We can come back to a poem and see something different in it. And when I was young, one of my first loves was the sound of language. I loved reading, and I would often read. There were stories when I was a kid. They were called read aloud books. I don't know if anybody remembers them. And my parents would buy them for me. You know, it was like stories and poems to read aloud, cat stories to read aloud, cats. And and so I would read all these books aloud. And it only occurred to me recently that I think those books were meant for parents to read to their children, but I just read them out loud to myself. So, and one of the poems, and because I did not give you any Gerard Manley Hopkins poems in your handout, and I really, really love his poetry. And one of the poems, before I even knew anything about him, when I was in high school and getting into university, the anthologies would always have a Hopkins in there somewhere. And some of you may know his poem about spring. And the first few lines of that poem have stuck in my head for many years, just because of the kinds of things that you've been saying, is the way that it sounds. And so, you know, it's when weeds and wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear. It strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. I just love that. I can't get it out of my head, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's the best earworm. But as much as I love the sound of words and the sound of poetry, over the years, meaning has become very important to me. And the Bible has become more and more important as a literature, but also as a fountain of life. The Bible sustains me every day. And over the last couple of years, as I was working towards retirement and thinking about what I want to share with people at this stage of my life, I thought about this passage in John 7, 37 to 39. My paper is different from yours, so don't worry. We'll get to that first poem on the first page. On the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." But this he spoke concerning the Spirit, whom those believing in him would receive, for the Holy Spirit was not yet given because Jesus was not yet glorified. So my hope is that something of the living water will come through in the things that I write and in what I say. Connected to this, I think, is the whole area of creativity. Creation, after all, is a life-giving process. And I see human creativity as coming from and resting in the creativity of God. So, what do other Christian poets say about what poetry is and what they hope to accomplish? There are many poets, of course, but I will borrow a quote from a living poet named Ben Palpant. Ben Palpant, he's an American writer and poet, and he wrote a book that was published last year titled An Axe for the Frozen Sea. That title is based on a quote from Franz Kafka, who said, "A book must be an axe for the frozen sea within us." And so Ben Palpant's book is an interview, or a series of interviews with 17 living poets, all Christian poets. And with one exception, because if you know of Lucy Shaw, she was interviewed for the book as well, but she has passed away in December. But in his introduction, Ben talks about how he decided to do this project and what he thinks about poetry himself. And he says, as a little boy, if you would have told him that he would grow up to be a poet, he would have kicked you in the shins. But obviously he came around. So this is what he says. "I believe the best poets practice seeing what most of us overlook or take for granted. They know how to honor the particularities of human existence, thereby opening our eyes to see ourselves, God, and all of his creation with greater clarity and appreciation, an appreciation that leads from praise to greater praise. Poets draw us to attention. They help us sit up and take note, leading us to the heart of things and beyond the heart of things. In other words, I believe poets can help us become more human as God intended. Poets, through the ordinary means of the written word, can give us glimpses of the eternal." And if that sounds like a book that you might be interested in, I have listened to it twice for free on Hoopla through the library. And I plan to order it because I just like it that much. So if you have Hoopla, you can get it. So I'd like us to take a look at the first poem in your handout. As someone who grew up on a farm, I really love this one. And whatever may be known or unknown about Robert Frost's own personal beliefs, I think something meaningful and life-giving comes through in this poem. Pardon me. I'm always froggy in the morning. TMI. The pasture. "I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear, I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by the mother It's so young it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too. So just again, get you to think about what is this poem about, just on the surface of it. What time of year is it? Spring.
And also, when I said I shan't be long, there's nothing on the world that doesn't feel longer than you expect.
So, great, all the thinking. Insanity.
I think he's breaking the leaves out of the book.
Yes,
Oh,
Even so,
even so.
Like here, I think I'm out to clear the trough. Past the spring.
The pasture-
so much nicer.
Yes, it sounds much nicer. I have to admit, I've not seen a pasture spring like that either. The little calf appeals to me. If you've ever, had cattle, you know that any that's so little it totters when the mother licks it, that's newborn.
it seems quite eager to share this.
Mhm. And then that repeated line, what's the importance of that?
She sang this set to music last spring. And it was a really
Oh.
clean and simple thing.
Hmm.
I'm going out to the pasture spring. I shan't be long. I'll only stop and rake the leaves away. I shan't be long. And wait to watch the water clear away. I shan't be long. And it was just sort of gently going up and down, a lot of unison. And it was clean,
Mhm.
and simple.
Hmm.
And this is a little bit like that. It's here.
Mhm. Just tells a really simple story. And then, when we start thinking about, well, how long will that little calf be tottery? And, he says it won't take long to watch the water clear. I guess I'm not an expert on that, but
Thinking about the source of his poetry here. The spring is like always like this image of the source of inspiration, not just water. And then comparing it to a mother cow licking a calf that is just born. Is that his idea? It's just coming something new idea that's so new that it's just tottery.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it more in terms of just the fleeting moments that we have in our lives, and that we should just take a moment and actually go out and look at these little things that happen in the spring or whatever time, because they won't be there long. And then our lives aren't here very long. What should we take the time to do? And I love this layer of the idea of his own creativity and the fleetingness of that, or the just how frail it could be, like that little calf pottery when it's new. Yeah.
It's an invitation to community.
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Mhm. So
There's a relationship too between cleaning the water in the spring and cleaning the calf, right? They're both coming up, welling up something new, something fresh. And there's an invitation for us to be involved in getting to the heart of what's fresh.
yeah. Yes.
I can't read this though without thinking of my own experience of going to get and very similar situation, but the mother didn't like me getting a class. Knocked me down and rubbed me in the dirt for a while.
Does that take the shine off it a little bit? So, anyway, just, just a few simple things from a poem that seems quite simple. And so for those people who say to you, well, I wish poets would just say what they mean, you can let them take what they will from the face of it. And yet on the other hand, you can extract these things and write them down. But are they as beautiful as this simple language and these two simple images? I like the images. Anyway, back in university, one of my favorite poets was George Herbert. And I understand that you've looked at one of his poems already. And since he lived from 1593 to 1633, his life overlapped with Shakespeare, John Donne, and the writing of the King James Bible. So he was well educated. He became a country parson for the last 4 years of his life. And if you're looking at his dates, I mean, he died when he was 39. So he did not really live a long time. As the story goes, when he was dying, he sent a collection of his poetry to a friend with instructions to make them public if he thought they could help any dejected poor soul, and if not, to burn them. So, in addition to being a metaphysical poet, Herbert is known for writing with emotional honesty about his faith and struggles. Aldous Huxley said that George Herbert is the poet of inner weather. So the next poem in your handout is by George Herbert. And actually, the next several poems are a series of related poems that, among other things, I think demonstrate how meaning can build from one poem to another. And we'll start with this one by George Herbert called Prayer. Prayer, the church's banquet, angels' age, God's breath in man returning to his birth, the soul in paraphrase, heart in pilgrimage, the Christian plummet sounding heaven and earth, engine against the Almighty, sinner's tower, reversed thunder, Christ side-piercing spear, the 6 days world transposing in an hour, a kind of tune which all things hear and fear, softness and peace and love and joy and bliss, exalted manna, gladness of the best, heaven in ordinary, man well dressed, the Milky Way, the bird of paradise, church bells beyond the stars heard, the soul's blood, the land of spices, something understood. So, what do you notice about the structure of this poem? What kind of poem is it? It's a sonnet. I heard somebody say sonnet. Yeah, it's a sonnet. And it's also a list. It's just a it's one sentence list. So, and just in case you might not know what a plummet is, it's a weight that's used to measure something, whether something's perpendicular. It's a weight that's tied on a string. So they used to use that to measure if something.
From the depths.
So that, and also to measure how deep. So you can measure depth, or you can measure straight, how perpendicular something is. So there's so much in this, and like I said, I'm not going to quite get into as much depth because I've got more more volume of poetry. So we're going to go through a few. The British poet Malcolm Guite is a singer-songwriter, a priest, and an academic, and he is really interested in George Herbert as well. And so in his book, The Word in the Wilderness, which I brought with me, and I've been reading through it. It's quite good. It's a poem a day for Lent and Easter, and he's got some commentary on each one. And actually, this poem we just read about prayer is in this book. And so this is what Malcolm Guite says about the prayer poem. Each of these images is in its own way. Each of these images is in its own way a little poem or the seed of a poem, ready to grow and unfold in the reader's mind. And the different seeds take root at different times, falling differently on the soil of the mind each time one returns to this poem. I've been reading it for over 30 years now, and I still find its images springing up freshly in my mind and showing me new things. So, similar to some of the things we've just been talking about. And so, when leading seminars or speaking to students, Guite would often challenge them to select one of the items from the list in this poem and write their own poem about it. And so eventually he decided to take his own advice and ended up writing a sonnet in response to each of the 27 items in the list of George Herbert's prayer poem. So, which ended up in this book called After Prayer. And so the first sort of chunk of this book is those 27 poems. We're not going to go, don't panic, we're not going to go through all 27, but I thought it would be kind of neat to just follow a bit of a thread, if we could, through starting with the prayer poem and through a little bit of a theme through some of Malcolm Guite's responses and also through a couple more of George Herbert's poems. So where I'm going to start with the thread is with love. So love was on the list. And then in the next one on your paper is Love 3 by George Herbert. So probably I think George Herbert's best known poem. Love bade me well, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. Love said, you shall be he. I, the unkind, ungrateful. Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. And know you not, says love, who bore the blame? My dear, then I will serve. You must sit down, says love, and taste my meat. So I did sit. So, of course, love is Christ. And we there's just that wonderful invitation and the different steps that I think just help us as we think through it to shed some of our own unworthiness, our feelings of unworthiness, and how Christ just welcomes us in and shows us his grace and hospitality. And we need the information from this poem to go on to the next one, which is Malcolm Guite's poem in response to the love item on George Herbert's prayer poem. I think that makes sense. So, love took George Herbert's hand and now takes mine. The same quick eyes, the same wry welcome smile, the same spear-pierced and always healing heart. He turns to me, and taking bread and wine, he spreads a table in the desert, while I hesitate and draw back, stand apart, afraid, as always, of committed love. But I have come too far to turn away. Though joy has vanished, She has led me here. So come, says love, there's nothing left to prove, and nothing that you need to do or say. I am that perfect love that casts out fear. Sit with George Herbert here, then taste and see, and find that all your loves are found in me. And so now it might seem counterintuitive, but we're going to go back to the first item in the list, which is the next page for you. And that is the church's banquet, because I feel like they've got us all seated here at a table, ready to go. Not some strict modicum, exact allowance, precise prescription, rigid regimen, but beauty and gratuitous abundance, capacious grace beyond comparison. Not something hasty, always snatched alone, fueling junkets of junk food, fueling our dis-ease. Not little snacklets eaten on the run, but peace and plenty taken at our ease. Not to be worked for, not another task, but love that's lavished on us, full and free, course after course of hospitality, and rich wine flowing from an unstopped flask. He paid the price before we reached the inn, and all he asks of us is to begin. So here we are at the inn hosted by Christ, and this poem put me in mind of another of George Herbert's poems. I have to admit, I don't know if this is what Geit had in mind when he was writing some of these, but I think it's an interesting connection. And it's actually, this poem is titled Christmas. And but the scene is the same. The scene is set at an inn. And it is a little different because, oh, are you still? Tiny little banner of light on you. There it is.
Okay. Good.
So it starts with someone riding their horse up to an inn. And I think for the most part, it makes sense. You'll see that it's the first section is a sonnet, but the second section is something, it has a different structure to it. And just to point out, right at the end of that first structure, there's reference to a better lodging than a rack or grave. And that rack, I think, means manger. That will make sense as we go through. And so, we just start reflecting on what an inn means at Christmas. So there's a little bit of a connection to that. And then also a response from the person who came to the inn to say, what is my response back to God? So, after all pleasures, as I rid one day, my horse and I, both tired, body and mind, with full cry of affections, quite astray, I took up in the next inn I could find. There where I came, whom found I but my dearest Lord, expecting till the grief of pleasures brought me to him, ready there to be all passengers' most sweet relief. O thou whose glorious yet contracted light, wrapped in night's mantle, stole into a manger, since my dark soul and brutish is thy right. To man of all beasts, be thou not a stranger. Furnish and deck my soul, that thou mayest have a better lodging than a rack or grave. The shepherds sing, and shall I silent be? My God, no hymn for thee? My soul's a shepherd too, a flock it feeds of thoughts and words and deeds. The pasture is thy word, the streams thy grace, enriching all the place. Shepherd and flock shall sing, and all my powers outsing the daylight hours. Then we will chide the sun for letting night take up his place and right. We sing one common Lord, wherefore he should himself the candle hold. I will go searching till I find a sun shall stay till we have done. A willing shiner that will shine as gladly as frost-nipped suns look sadly. Then we will sing and shine all our own day, and one another pay. His beams shall cheer my breast, and both so twine till even his beams sing, and my music shine. So, in response to this love and hospitality, our attention is drawn to the heavens, and we are thinking about light, music, and praise Christ. So that takes us to the last item in this little thread. Pardon me. Church bells beyond the stars heard. So that was near the end of the list. And this is another Malcolm Guite response. Is it our bells they hear beyond the stars, or theirs, whose echo sounds to us below? Or is it both? The music of the spheres, which we imagine and yet cannot know, whose ringing joy we hear and do not hear, elicits a response. And our church bells, whose steepled peals still ring in each new year, all cry and clamor for the time that tells us time itself is over. The dark veil is lifted, and we see the radiant face of love in everything. The mournful bell that tolled for all our funerals gives place to heaven's music, truly heard at last. Our last change rung on earth, our last pain past. So,
What do you think the music stands for? These last couple poems, it's heaven's music, but it seems to have more meaning than that.
so I think, well, for one thing, both Herbert and Guy were really interested in music. They both love to talk about music, and they write about music in their poetry.
He is himself a musician. He plays in a band.
Yes, yes. And so very much, and in some of other George Herbert's poems, he often talks about writing and music as being something he can do in response to God. And so one of his other poems is called Employment. And he's sort of complaining that everyone else is busy, but he doesn't know. He's just sort of begging God to let him in on it and just let me write a little bit, you know. And I
like the the little drummer boy in the song, like, look, what do I have to give?
Yeah, it's something of that sentiment. He feels that he wants to give something back, and sometimes he feels uncertain about his own gifts. And so that I think that is part of it. But maybe you had some particular thoughts, Brenda?
No, I was just thinking
wondering.
that, like,
Yeah.
creativity and
Mhm.
praise and response, and the angels singing in
The
the
angels
previous
singing.
one, right? And,
Yes.
and then we have the music of the spheres too.
We have the music of the spheres.
which is
So I'm not super well versed
yeah.
in this, but I think there are those here who are. But I understand that when people looked at the way that the planets were arranged in times past, that they believed that there was a harmony to them and that there was a kind of music that was coming from them, and that that there was a lot of meaning tied up in that. And so in George Herbert's day, mentioning those kinds of things would really resonate with people because this was their understanding of it. And so Guide is tapping into that.
That harmony in creation,
Harmony
that God sets in motion.
Well, I don't think they weren't referring to planets, spheres. They're referring to the spheres the planets were attached to.
Like their orbits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, they didn't know planets were balls. The Earth's didn't need that. Well, believe that there was the Earth was at the center, and then there was these various spheres that the other things were attached to. That's why the planets moved not according to the rest of the stars. Planet just means movable star, right? So I mean, it's like sometimes it looks like the planets go backwards because the way actually things actually are. So the spheres were these transparent balls, I guess, that the planets were attached to. So that's what refers to as spheres here, not the planets themselves.
And apparently I was Googling this, this goes all the way back to Pythagoras, who believed that the orbits were in mathematical ratios that corresponded to musical ratios. And so that idea of the music coming through and the spheres and the orbits.
And orreries were really
way
popular, right? Those machines that they're called orreries, and it was mechanical that they could turn, planets would move. And they're on these little rings, not spheres, but rings. So you could turn it and you'd see the planets moving according to each other.
So it's something about the creator's almost perfection, I guess, and infinity in creation, but it continues, and there's that harmony even in the macrocosm space and also in human affairs and
There's also
order.
the biblical allusion in Job. One of the questions God asked Job, where were you when things were created, when all the morning stars sang together, right? There's that imagery of the stars singing.
Nice.
Yes.
I guess I was thinking about this because I've been reading ahead, thinking about J.R.R. Tolkien. So there's a little ad we'll pick up that theme again next week.
C.S. Lewis in his creation story has Aslan literally singing the world into existence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's one of my favorite scenes in the Narnia Chronicles. And speaking of the Narnia Chronicles, there's actually, and since we're talking about that and the music of the spheres, there's a prof in the UK who has written a book called Planet Narnia. And his idea, you obviously have heard of this, is that each of the Narnia Chronicles was based on one of those spheres. And so this book, After Prayer by Malcolm Guite, the first section is in response to George Herbert's prayer poems. But then after that, there is a section of poems in response to Michael Ward's Seven Heavens, Seven Hells, a sequence for the spheres is what he's called. And so in response to his Planet Narnia book and the different sections related to the books of the Narnia Chronicles. I'm just starting to learn about these things myself. I listened to a talk by Michael Ward recently where he was laying that out just on YouTube. So it's interesting. And so I have lots of learning to do here. But if you're interested in that, After Prayer by Malcolm Guite has, both of those things in it.
Yeah. You know about his collaboration with Steve Bell?
A little bit, yeah.
A lot of, like, not quite a few of Malcolm's poems have been adapted into songs by Steve Bell. And they've put into a collaboration.
They do. And so have you had a chance to hear them or?
Yeah, quite a few of them, yeah.
Very nice.
The poems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening over and over to song that's because we hunkered down, and it's about it was originally written by Malcolm's experience recovering from I believe a broken leg.
Yeah.
But it is about basically surviving winter. Yeah, but he also but there's a lot of a lot more depth to it as well. But it's about the release of from those dark times and spaces.
Yeah. I was very jealous the last time or just annoyed me because the last time he came out here, I didn't know until he was leaving and I could have slipped out. I think he was performing in Manitoba. Well, Steve Bell was performing here.
Yeah.
And he had Malcolm with him on part of the tour, but not in Regina.
Yeah.
And then he was giving a talk at a bookstore in Brandon, and I just missed realizing that it was on, and I would have gone to it. So it was too bad.
He also has a very close partnership with Andrew Peterson.
Yes.
And the very well that there's attachment. So yeah. So
Yes.
Yeah.
You speak of the rabbit room.
Yes.
So for those that don't know, there's a group in the States that's interested in Christianity and the arts, and they call themselves the Rabbit Room because the pub where the Inklings met, the C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and some of their friends, was called the Eagle and Child, which they nicknamed the Bird and Baby. But in the back of the Bird and Baby, there was a room that they used to meet in called the Rabbit Room. And so that's why these people call themselves their organization, the Rabbit Room, and they have gatherings called Hutchmoot.
Because the hutch is where rabbits live, and a moot is a gathering together. The rabbits gather together. It's a hutchmoot.
That's the headline. So that was a fun rabbit trail.
I could take you on another rabbit trail. Some Canadian Baptist Ministry sends out a monthly email, and in it this time it focused on Lebanon and the situation there. And there was a poem in there. It's on the second page of the email that was so awesome. It was just dealt with all the tough things that people there are facing, but and I don't know, giving me things to pray about and some hope. So if you get that CBM email, read it.
Good advice. Thank you. Thank you.
Written by Johanna Nacho, the academic team of Nazareth Evangelical College.
You got it there?
I can read it if you want.
It might be worth reading it.
It says, "This is a season of weeping and mourning, but it is not void of hope. Our tears are the bridge between brutality and humanity. Our tears are the salty gates for seeing a different reality. Our tears are facing soulless nations and a parched mentality. Our tears are the dam preventing rivers of animosity. For the sake of the mourning men, cry with us to reflect your amity. For the sake of the poor children, cry with us, demanding sanity.
For the sake of lamenting mothers, refuse violence and stupidity. Love your enemies and cry with them is the advice of divinity. Blessing those who curse is the path to genuine spirituality. Pouring tears of mercy and compassion is true piety. Pray with tears for the sake of spreading equity. Followers of Jesus, crying is now our responsibility. But don't cry for your friends only. Cry also for your enemy.
Mm. Mm. Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
I would like to still get to your poem, Leila. That
There's
was
one-
really
there's-
topical. I like
That was, yeah, thank you so much. There is one last page on your handout. This poem was something that I wrote about an experience that I had a long time ago in my work life. You know, and I think we've all had those moments where we've made a dumb mistake and we're kicking ourselves. And I was in that place. And so I was walking home from work and I was really beating myself up in my head. And just as I was walking along, this quiet question just came into my mind. How do I feel about you? And well, how does God feel about me? He loves me. I know this. This is what I believe. He loves me. And just the truth of it just deflated so much of my destructive thinking in that moment. And as I was just this past fall, now that I'm sort of thinking through some things and revisiting some of these things, I wrote this poem about that experience. It's called Disruption. The dominoes are falling, clicking next and next. Appalling fool, they all agree. Pathetic, stupid, fake. Repeat the vexed and clacking tongues behind my mind. Crawling freedom, reason beaten, treason tells my soul there's no hope. Excuses get old. Self-blame beats in my ears. Fears to hear the whole set clatter down in shambles, shame on shame. But you disrupt my chaos with your one quiet question. How do I feel about you? You. Oh, you love me. I'm not alone. I guess I knew. But I knocked a tile out of place and caused an avalanche. That game was frightful. Still, you love me all the same.
that seems very much in the spirit of the other poets and dealing with struggle and a kind of insight that comes out of that. Very brave of writers, I think, to share it. As a teacher, I always hide behind the other writers and they get to say the hard things. But I value them. Yeah, that's why I like thinking about it.
Yes, thank you. Well, you know, very often we are writing about our struggles. And, you know, as I start listening to other poets and thinking about what their process is, and I think, why did I wonder what I should write about when I was younger? Because they're all just writing about whatever happens to them. It's really, honestly, that's very much what it is. One of them in the book that I mentioned with all the interviews, his name is Young Lee, and he was saying that he had just had a kind of transformative experience himself and had looked at a piece of art that just really got him thinking about the finished work of Christ. And he was just in the midst of a sort of an emotional kind of reset himself. And he was saying, there's nothing left but praise. There's nothing left but thanking God for all that he has done for us. And so I think that is part of what was coming through in a couple of the poems that we read today as well, that gratefulness. And yet we can never forget that that is coupled with us being here on this planet and very difficult things that happen. And we are hand in hand with Christ walking through.
I like it that you've taken us from one pastor, which was Robert Frost's pastor out in the muck and the water and the leaves, to George Herbert's pasture. It's what does he say? He told it the pasture of the pasture is thy word
Yes.
and streams thy grace.
Mm.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
I like the vulnerability in your poem because I think we've all been in some way, and we're not quite sure how to express it. So,
Thank you.
Verse from 139 as well.
Mm.
Someone reflecting thousands of years ago on their own fallibility and mortality, and coming again to one thing, which is what made them.
Yeah. Yes. There's something about, I think, whatever else we can complain about when it comes to being older, if we have spent time with God, there's a recognition and a comfort, I think, that builds up. Not that we know everything, because that's really not the case at all, but just that we know where to go, I think. Yeah. Well, I don't have anything more. That's kind of what I'm.
So thank you so much, Leila, for coming today. And next week we will look at J.R.R. Tolkien's retelling of the creation story. It's taken from the Silmarillion, and it's called Aina Lindale, which I think means the music of the angels. Anyway, so that'll be a nice bridge into that, and I will value all of your insights again, because I'm not a Tolkien expert by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe an appreciator of and a reader at times. So just like the poems, I used to teach poetry in Fear and Trembling, because I thought I understand fiction. That's kind of the way my mind works, but and the storytelling sort of mode, especially in contemporary literature. But then I loved these poems, so I thought they're very worth doing. So with that in mind, let's pray and close for today. Father in heaven, thank you so much for showing us your harmony in creation, and that we are part of that creation, and that your spirit breathes life and is the source and spring of life, both communally and individually, and in time and space, as well as in our own hearts and lives and minds. Lord, thank you for the creativity, the gift that you've given to the writers we've been looking at, and for the creativity and insight that you've given Leila, and that they share this with us, and it helps us to reflect on your beauty and your creative spirit as the maker of this world and life that we have been given. Lord, thank you. Help us to praise you in response, and to trust you more and more as we grow. In Christ's name we pray this. Amen. I do have some copy. Oh, no, I didn't bring it with me.